We got one over here. Drink Moxie says,
Yo, Moxie, what up?
Dear Black Knight and Court Jester from Castle Super Beast, why is it that people get excited for a remake of a game, but when a movie remake comes out or gets announced, everyone freaks the fuck out negatively?
That's a pretty good question.
Also, thank you for sending me down a Chernobyl hole after last week's podcast. That's a very good question.
It's a super cool, for one, Chernobyl hole is super cool.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating event.
Yeah. So that question
is really good.
Is interesting.
Yeah.
And I think it's like you feel it right away because video games are an interactive medium.
Yep. You can flat out improve the interactive portion.
Like objectively.
Yes.
Right?
Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil Remake 1, same system, better to play, feel, look at.
Okay.
Like better.
Film and like high res modern movie making, digital and such, is a direct upgrade, right?
Yeah.
However, CG versus
practical
effects still being debated.
Also, like,
depends on how you do it.
Let's take a good example. A remake in movies, you have remakes that, just like in games, you do occasionally have the remake that invalidates the original. John Carpenter's The Thing makes The Thing from Outer Space look like a fucking joke. That movie doesn't exist anymore in most people's minds. There's only John Carpenter's The Thing, right?
I don't know anybody who went back to the original Scarface or who went back to the original House of Cards.
Right. But
so it happens sometimes.
If you were to say make a remake of John Carpenter's The Thing or a spiritual whatever, like they did, well, one, John Carpenter's not directing it. Two, Kurt Russell's not there. And I'm not going to sit here and say that voice or performance capture actors are not a big part of video games. But when you have a character-driven film, there is little more important than the actor that is going to be on the screen. So when you turn that into a different person, and not just a different voice, not just different, it's a big fucking deal. I'm going to use Resident Evil again. How much of the acting in Resident Evil is even in the game? It's like 5% of the total game. And also, Resident Evil 1's voice acting is a legend for how awful it is. But that didn't stop it from being a great game.
Now, film, on the other hand, is like, in a lot of cases, old classic films, like, literally stand up and hold up and don't need revisiting.
And you look at it and you go, this is just as good as it was the day it came out.
They continue to be excellent.
Yeah.
Right? The shots, cinematography, script, writing, planning, acting, delivery, all these things there's no replacing these required because they're still top notch.
Like, I appreciate Goodfellas. It's not a movie I would watch again, but it's a great movie. I obviously recognize that. The oneer in Goodfellas with the fucking walking through the club and all that shit.
Yeah.
That wasn't a new idea then.
Yeah.
And it's not a new idea now.
It's still one of the greatest shots in film history.
Yeah.
Single shots in film history. You honestly, like, that's the thing is, and games do risk losing things in the update as well. But games, it's much more obvious and clear how much there is to be gained.
Yes.
By the upgrade to gameplay, by the upgrade to just mistakes that, like, mechanical things that failed. In some cases, just literally if you're talking about 3D games, so in some cases it's like literally the model just looked like shit.
So let's take, for example, because you're talking about the nature of technology, right? Let's take a movie made in 1968. Random fucking movie, right? The film is not going to be as high quality as the shit they film on now. It's going to be grainier, right? The lighting, probably some techniques got invented. But at the end of the day, if you look at a good movie shot in the 60s of two people talking in a room, it's going to be appreciable to a good movie shot now about two people talking in a room. It's going to look stylistically different. It's going to, people are going to have different hairstyles and all that shit. But the core of it, which is the acting and the shot composition, doesn't matter when it was made. There's going to be trends and styles and all sorts of shit. And sometimes technology will inform those. Like bullet time is a really good example. That's a type of shot that couldn't exist prior, right? But in games, it's so R2 is so easy for this question because it just came out, right? You have fucking dog shit PS1 models who are their arms are flailing all over the place because the characters can't fucking talk with their mouths.
In a best case scenario, the game itself is great and really doesn't need revisiting, but it was on a console where the controller sucked and the loading time was awful.
Yeah.
So just that alone means you're like, well, going back to experience this means fucking around with a bunch of shitty loading times and or disc swapping.
Think about every game that came out that was in 3D before camera control got fucking figured out.
Oh, God.
You could re-release all of those games now
yeah.
with a second analog stick as they are, and they would just be better, right? They'd just be better.
A lot of Dreamcast stuff. So it really, so like that's the thing is games just lend themselves naturally to being revisited because there's so much obvious things to improve.
For fuck's sake, look at Monster Hunter World. We were just talking about it. You know what Monster Hunter World is? It's a remake of Monster Hunter 4, and that's a remake of Monster Hunter 3, and that's a remake of Monster Hunter 2, and that's a remake of Monster Hunter 1. Now go back and play Monster Hunter 1. Guess what? That game is garbage. It is shocking that a series came out of that. Do you know you attack with the analog stick in that fucking piece of shit?
That's amazing.
It is terrible.
Meanwhile, when you reshoot, refilm, recast, and remake the movie, you're probably, what are you dropping in the process? The performance of the amazing actors that were probably in the original.
Yeah.
In many cases,
Swapping them out for new performances that might not be as good.
Dropping them or losing, even if they're good, losing nuance in the performance that really made certain scenes work better than others.
Yeah.
In some cases, losing music that if you decide to not go for a similar score, in some cases they would literally just change the tone of something.
Yeah.
Adding weirdness, like adding the possibility of like making not a trend, but like a stylistic choice that doesn't necessarily belong,
or clashes a little, or it doesn't
work. Did you see perfect timing? Actually, this week there's a project that's been in the works for a while, and it finally was finished, and it's a remake of the moment that Obi-Wan walks up to Darth Vader in A New Hope.
Oh, a remake? What? Okay, so like a fan
made.
All right, what's changed?
It's now shot in a modern Star Wars lightsaber fight context.
Okay.
So the fight that looked kind of slow and weird,
because it was an old man and a man in a suit that couldn't see what he was doing.
Yes.
And neither of them knew how to fight with swords.
Is now updated to have like dramatic music, spins out of Attack of the Clones, when Return of the Revenge of the Sith spins.
Yeah, crazy.
Wall pushes,
bounces, yeah,
and at least 2 or 3 times actual lens flares.
Yeah, that's terrible. That's awful. What you just described.
So that just came out, right? And it's funny because watching it, you're seeing parts where you're like, okay, well,
that's cool.
Well, the choreography of the 2 guys swinging their swords
probably pretty cool, right?
is better. It's better.
Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is.
Because we've gotten better at choreography.
Yeah, choreography used to be shit.
Yes.
Unless you were watching a Hong Kong movie from China.
So if you were to simply take that choreography and replace the old movies with that and leave it there,
yeah,
you're looking at an upgrade.
Sure.
But what did we lose in the process?
Well, you lost Alec Guinness.
Sure. You lost a bunch, like, basically you add a lot of stuff that is like, it is current for the time. It is not going to age well when you zoom in on Darth Vader's face as the red is burning behind him and the lens flare off the lightsaber is shining. And it really is like, oh, this is a in the moment fight.
And also, I mean, this is a point that our the RLM's Mr. Mike Stoklasa made, which is the fight doesn't fucking matter. Like the fact that they're fighting doesn't mean a goddamn fucking thing.
It's the characters and
it's the characters arguing. Yes. That's what matters.
Yes.
Right? And yeah, in a video game, yeah, better fighting, yeah, it's better.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm reminded of a interview with the guys behind Mark of the Ninja. The Clay guys, right? And Mark of the Ninja, in its prototype phase, had a fairly in-depth combat system for fighting enemies. And they would give it to people, and the people would fuck up the stealth part and then fight their way through the stage. And they go, well, no, that's not what the game is about. The game is about being a sneaky ninja.
Yeah.
So they took out some of the fight moves.
Yeah.
And then they took out more of the fight moves.
Mm-hmm.
And then people kept doing it, and they're like, okay, then they took out every single combat mechanic that wasn't sneaking around and murdering people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the game is about. Just adding things isn't necessarily better, right?
Or are you diluting your message?
Yeah.
You know?
Like, what is this actually about?
Yeah.
Is this about the fact that these two have an ideological difference and they're arguing, and Obi-Wan's like, hey, Darth, you're a fucking asshole?
Or is it about the fact that Obi-Wan is cooler with his
Oh my God,
lightsaber
he's such a
than-
cool
than
fighter.
Darth Vader is? Yeah.
Like and like it's Mike points out, or Alan points out, it's like the most important part of the fight is when Obi-Wan turns the fucking lightsaber off. That's the only part of the fight that matters. Is when he gives up and says, fuck you. It doesn't even matter if you kill me.
So, all that to say that the things lost in film remake, and the risks you take by having to recreate performances, replace special effects with CG effects that might not even be better, in some cases replace score with, like it's you're really doing a lot of questionable moves that are rolling the dice on whether they're going to actually be better. And if the end result is better in some ways but worse in others, then we end up feeling like, well, was this even necessary?
Yeah.
And you get your RoboCop where we go, man, that part of RoboCop is cool and that part was cool and the rest of that was pointless, and why does this exist?
So and also bluntly, film remakes, I mean, the game industry is some soulless shit, right? The film industry never forgot what the idea of a fucking soul is at this point. Like a film, when you got to see RoboCop, one of the all-time greatest 80s R-rated action movies, get announced for a remake, you immediately knew it would be bad. And you were right. Because it was being made because people know what the word RoboCop is.
That's the only reason why.
Right? When you
Total
heard...
Recall?
What's that?
Total Recall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing.
It happened to a bunch of them.
Right? When you heard that Resident Evil 2, one of the all-time greatest late 90s horror violent action games, was getting remade, you went, oh, cool! That'll probably play better and be more violent and cool looking, and they'll do these scenes in these cool new ways that they couldn't do at the time, even though they wanted to. Because games, up until 30 years from now, still have types of things they want to do that they just can't.
And here's the other part too. The subtlety of performance, right, that I was describing happens so rarely in games.
Yes, very, very, very.
That, the only and the biggest, the most recent example we can bring up is literally you talking about the cloud you want versus the cloud you're probably going to get. How many other games can you even have that discussion about? That's not always...
And the only reason we even have that discussion is because there were versions of that character that existed later in higher fidelity with different directorial choices and all that shit, and it's weird.
It's a very different thing. Like, a lot of the time, you're just losing too much from that original. And then the other thing, of course, is the movies that can take the original and fucking make Han Solo step on Jabba's tail, or put the fucking you know what I mean, or and just slice it up and do all these weird things.
But I'm thinking what's the simplest dumbest answer to this question?
Yeah.
And it's most movie remakes are terrible. Most game remakes are at least mechanically improved.
Okay, so just the simple
just straight up
appeal to history.
The track record.
Just look at what's out. Okay.
One pretty good track record. The other near exclusive disaster.
Fair enough. So yeah, on the closing point then, even if you disagree with the reasons and breakdown of what we're trying to talk about,
there are so many bad
you
movie
can just
remakes.
look at the numbers of it. Yeah, that's fair.
Look at Capcom. They remade RE1. Fucking amazing. One of the best games ever. They remade RE2. Amazing. One of the best games ever. Capcom could say they're remaking any game right now, and even if it's not as good as the last one, or it's totally different, you'd go, oh, this Dino Crisis game's probably going to be pretty good.
Yeah, and then there's the bad ones. You know,
Yeah.
There's occasionally you get some bad remakes out there. Nobody talks about Rocket Knight, but like,
You mean Rocket Knight Adventure for the Genesis, right?
that's correct.
That's a great game.
Fantastic.
Sparkster is also apparently pretty good as
It
well.
is a very good game.
What are you talking about?
Point made.
Yeah.
But with film, it just happens around every corner, you know, and the machine, the production machine seems to like thrive on grabbing old name and.
How many bad Rob Zombie remakes of existing properties do we need?
Jeez, I mean, I actually heard that the Evil Dead one wasn't awful. I heard it was just different,
Yeah, sure.
but I didn't watch it. I don't know.
Did it have Bruce Campbell in it?
No,
Then I don't give a shit. And that's a thing that only movies have, by the way. Nobody says that shit about games.
Yeah. Not to mention, well, no, not DMC. DMC's a reboot. That's not a reboots are not the same
that's
as
a C-boot.
reboots and reimaginings are not the same as
Yeah.
as remakes. You know, but yeah, that's a really good question though. Good job.
I like Bruce Campbell. He's a cool guy.